We're going to call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Mr. Pollard, would you do the pledge? I would look for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? That will take us to the report, student enrollment trends.
This is a report that we look at every year at this time. So we definitely want to do that again. What's different this year, however, is we do have a demography study underway. And so all of our numbers like this will all come back to us, as part of that demography study as we're looking to the future. But that being said, we look at our first attendance day in October every year and just kind of compare. And we do October 1st instead of the beginning of school because on the first day of school, our numbers tend to be artificially high. We have all of our new students usually on the first day of school, but we also don't necessarily have all of our exited out students who maybe the new schools for them haven't requested records yet. So that's why we do this in October. So we'll have Dr. Gooch will kind of display the tables in the room as I kind of share some of the highlights. We'll start with elementary, kindergarten through 5th grade. So elementary enrollment has seen the largest one-year gain in quite some time, since 2009. We have 1,941 students, grades K through 5. We have seen that number before. We've seen that exact number in 2013 and again in 2021. So it's not a record high for us, but it is a pretty good jump for us, maybe one of the largest jumps we've seen in a while. All 4 elementary schools have more students than a year ago, and that's the first time that has happened since 2012. So that fact is unique. So all 4 of our schools have grown over the last 12 months. Overall, we're at 88% capacity, grades K through 5. And in the table, you see the blue line, which is year over year, all of our elementary students, grades K through 5. You see a red line and a tan line. The red line represents 90% capacity. And on our long-range facilities plan, which by coincidence is also being updated this year, when we hit 90% capacity, that triggers some kind of action, either a review for the need of additional classrooms, a review of the need for elementary number 5, but it triggers some type of action. One of the actions that it could trigger is, as a school district, is do we need land for elementary number 5 potentially? So we already have land that could be considered for a new elementary school when the time permits. So technically, as we kind of kiss up against that 90% line, you could say we've already taken a big step forward if we have land that we could use for a school. But either way, that's what the red line represents. The tan line is where the red line used to be. And so this is the first time you've seen both of these lines. The tan line represents if every classroom in a school, most every classroom in a school was used for a kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, on up to 5th grade classroom, that's where the line would be. But because we have our programming for special needs has increased over the years and is taking up more classroom space within each of our schools, the actual capacity of our elementaries has declined because we have fewer rooms available for regular ed classrooms. So that's why you're seeing 2 different lines. So when we have been looking at the tan line in previous years, we say, well, yep, we're getting close, we're kind of dancing, we're staying kind of flat, we're up and down a little bit. Well, now when we adjust for our adjusted capacities, now you can see, oh, we haven't really grown much in the last 12 years, but yet we are now kissing the line. So we've set a year-long goal is for our annual priorities that we are doing the demography study and we're doing a new long-range plan for facilities. So what we do about this issue is going to be something we're going to talk about for much of the school year. But just wanted to get the numbers in front of you today. Any questions on elementary before we move on to middle school? You can see, let me move on to table 4 for elementary. You can see at the bottom the enrollments for each of the elementary schools, and then the percentage is the percent capacity. So even though we're 88% capacity as a district, you can see that Matthews is 93%, Prairie Branch is 95%, and those schools feel that. The difference between 93% and closer to 100% is just by chance the number of kids that landed in a certain grade level. But really, they no longer have extra classrooms available. They're already getting creative in how they use their space once you get up in the 90s. Snyabar and Stony Point, they would tell you, I think one of the schools has a classroom that it's not being fully utilized right now, but they would tell you that they feel essentially full well. When you have space for a while and you get used to looking at space, you use space. But if those two schools got up closer to 90%, there are creative things we could do. There's kind of a pecking order of who's going to get how much real estate. So those schools would be surprised to hear that they are only at 82 and 83% capacity. They feel like they're full, but I assure you there's a little room to grow in there. So anyway, wanted to point out those percentages before we moved on to middle school. Our middle school enrollment remains flat overall, but one unique feature this year is that North Middle School has surpassed the enrollment at South Middle School for the first time in the school's history. North has seen 10 years of continuous growth, while South has seen 9 years of declining enrollment. And I throw out a theory here that'll be tested, I think, when we get our demography study, and that is, although there's not a lot of new construction happening at the moment, the growth in recent years has happened on the north half of the district, supporting North Middle School. So younger families tend to be there. That's where the new homes are. It's where the younger families are. So that's where the kids are. That's where the growth is for student enrollment. The city would tell you that's yet 2/3 for the city population. 2/3 of the residents of Green Valley live still south of I-70. But what we are seeing is that school-age residents and school-age youth, that the north half is now competing with the south half. So the south half of the community is aging. So these are more empty. They're more likely to have streets with houses of empty nesters who still remain in the community. They're not moving away because their kids have grown. And so the opportunity for families with school-age kids, there's more opportunities for them to find homes and places to live on the north side of town. So we'll test that theory when we see the demography study. All right, let's jump to high school. The high school enrollment has reached a new high after 2 years of slowed growth. They have 1,495 students this week in grades 9 through 12. That is 32 more than a year ago, and I believe that is the new record high. And a few weeks ago, they topped 1,500. So again, this is why it pays to kind of delay our analysis and draw big implications until October 1st, because in Dr. Smith, I haven't asked him about it, but he might be disappointed that they dipped below 1,500 because they were kind of excited about hitting that benchmark, but we kind of took their fun from them. I want to explain the lines on this one because on table 6, you have the blue line that shows the high school enrollment since 2007. And then you have a yellow line and a red line, and there's a lot more gap between these two lines than there was on those elementary lines. And the reason is that this yellow line represents the instructional capacity of the high school. So when every teacher teaches all of their classes in their own classroom, and when they have their plan time, there's no one else using their classroom, that's the yellow line. So that's 75% of true capacity. If there was a class being taught in every classroom every hour, and so when a teacher has a plan time, they got to get out of the space, and you got teachers on carts, people are moving about, that's the red line. That's 100% capacity. You don't really want to be at 100% capacity, because in order for 100% capacity to work, the kids have to distribute equally across all departments, all courses, and that's just not how it works. So it would start to, so within the range between instructional capacity, and then as you approach the red line, it gets increasingly more uncomfortable. Once we have our demography study, once we have our new long-range facilities plan, one of the questions that we will have to address in the next few years is what do we want to do at the high school level as a community to say, like, how big is too big? Because right now, what we have built is a school that has an instructional capacity that supports basically what we have right now, class sizes or grade levels of, I would say we average 360 kids per grade level at the high school. So that's our instructional capacity at the high school. And if we were to really stretch this thing and get to 2,000, now we're at 500 kids per grade level. So somewhere between 360 of a graduating class and 500 graduating class, we'll have some decisions to make as a district about, at what point do we want a second high school or some other facility to support high school age students while we're transitioning into really being able to justify a new high school. I would say, in terms when people get excited about the prospects of a second high school in the short term, the growth trajectory doesn't really support any level of urgency on that matter. I think the issue is going to be that within the next few years, we're going to be ready to come back with another phase of the high school addition and renovation. And that's going to be the big question of how big are these additions and how much renovation are we doing? We certainly want to renovate and finish out what we started at the high school, but every time we add more classrooms, we're adding capacity. So we're getting close enough to the end game that we need to be thinking about what is the end game in Grain Valley and what is that target. So that's why it's important to think about. And I think talking about this tonight gives us a chance to kind of have that mindset when we do hear from our demographer, which we do expect to hear either, I would say, in November or December. We haven't been given a solid date on when that report is ready, but we'll have our demographer himself come and help deliver that report when the time comes. Any questions on the high school numbers? And then just, you see a table with our K-12 enrollment trends, and it's pretty telling as well. The growth at the start, 2007, 2008, still pretty steep. We got from 3,000 to 3,500 pretty quickly. And then see how much longer it took to get to 4,000. And then it took about the same amount of time to get to 4,500. So the growth has certainly slowed. And the slowing that we have seen in the last 10 or 15 years has certainly made it possible for us to do the kinds of projects at the high school that we've done, for us to take time to update our athletic facilities and some of those other things where we didn't have to worry about just adding classroom after classroom all the time. So it's been nice to take a breather. We try to squeeze out what are the takeaways on this year's report. And so the recommendations are pretty simple. Let's see what the demography study shows us. Let's use that demography study, share it with the architects so that they can come back and show us a revised long-range facilities plan. And then in the short term, let's continue to commit resources as needed to help each of the buildings. And the board did that. You approved the addition of some elementary positions late in the summer, and we moved one teacher from one elementary school to another. So that was a big help. We kind of got to play it smart the best that we can. Sometimes we have to make those hard decisions, but that's our report on that tonight. But we would certainly take any questions.
Thank you. I think the first is we've got the property up north where we could put another elementary school, and that could potentially save us quite a bit of money. I understand that, but I'm not sure that the community would feel that that's the best move. And what I mean by that is what really has seemed in the past to resonate with the community is embedding schools closer to the neighborhood like we have at Prairie Branch.
Right.
And we don't know what the future looks like, but I think it's something that we need to be open-minded about. We may need to acquire a parcel somewhere to, if we're thinking another elementary school, and I don't know
Yeah.
if we are, but that's one comment. Second, I think we need to keep in mind that a lot of our district, some of our district, maybe a lot's a little overstep. Some of our district is actually outside of the city of Green Valley, and we may see developments on the peripheral edges of Oak Grove and Blue Springs. I know there's a Blue Springs development kind of under consideration.
Yep.
And so we, in communicating with the city, we may not be getting the full scope of really what's to come. So I think it's very important that we continue to communicate with other municipalities to make sure that we're getting the full picture. And then finally, I think it's more than just buildings that we need to worry about. There are other things as we see more growth, especially at that middle school level. We have talked about different programs for North versus South. So like 2 basketball teams, 2 volleyball teams. That's something that we have been reluctant to step into. But as we see continued growth at those levels, I think that the demand may be there to not just consider facilities, but all of the other things that go with that.
No, those are all
I think
great.
that's it.
Those are all important points.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? As far as the middle school capacity, what's the capacity of each of our middle school buildings?
We have North at 650 as capacity. And I think South, I would want to go back and look at this number, but South we had listed at one point as 750 capacity. But I find that really hard to believe that that would still be the case for the same reasons that we don't have high capacity numbers in our elementary schools. Functionally, we think about both middle schools as roughly the same capacity because they're both fully built out. So I would say, I would put both schools at 650 would be my estimate.
That is one thing that I'm sorry, did you over there?
Go ahead.
One thing I thought was interesting looking at the elementary schools, looking at Matthews, and it's 93%. Prairie Branch was 95, but there's actually 100 more, over 100 more students there at Prairie Branch. I'm sure that, just more classrooms there in the bottom, but
Right.
that it's not just classrooms, it's the lunchroom. And I mean, there's just a lot more kids in that building than we see anywhere else in the district right now.
Yeah, and my assumption is being that that was the last elementary school built, it was built with the plan of it being able to house more students as far as capacity with lunchrooms and things like that. Oh, it did?
Yeah. The difference is the site at Prairie Branch, and I wasn't here when we built Prairie Branch. I came when we built Stony Point. But the site on Prairie Branch kind of lent itself to having a lower level, so it has a 2-story there on the end, and that's where it picks up the capacity that's bigger than the other schools. And Stony Point's actually built on a very small piece of land, so it's pretty well landlocked back in there. But one of the things that we will look at, I mean, we do talk about elementary number 5, but one of the things that we will look at on our long-range facilities plan, and we'll try to make some decisions on recommendations yet this school year, will be, is building, and is this the time to plan to build elementary number 5, or are there other creative solutions? So, it might, if there is a way to add on to a school that is creative and doesn't take away from programming, that would be something we'd want to consider as well. But even if we don't build elementary number 5, let's just say in the next 5 years, we have to have a plan for what's going to trigger that and where it would likely be. We'd have to be doing those things because we are pushing the threshold. And when you ride the 90% threshold, and then you have 200 homes that go in a year and a half's time, and you have another 100 elementary students. Now, you don't want to be left standing there going, "Oh wow, I sure wish we'd seen this coming." Like, you want to be able to anticipate that so you can stay ahead of it the best that you can.
So from a functional standpoint, from an economic standpoint, what would be the minimum percentage that you'd want in an elementary school for numbers?
Like if you were to build a new school, but it wasn't a big school yet? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I'm just looking at if we do we'll just say we're just
We're just
shooting in the
yeah.
dark. You know, we build another elementary school. We have to redo all the lines, all that. And so what would our target be for these percentages
Oh, I got you.
across the district to make sure that we're not having one school that's virtually empty?
I got you. When we did the last boundary adjustment for elementary schools, and Matthews, if I remember, Matthews and Prairie Branch were both 91%, something like that. I know they were in the low 90s. We had Snibar and Stony Point that were in the upper 70s, and the adjustment on paper shifted the upper 80s to Snibar and Stony Point because they weren't growing, and what we were giving them was not growth. So they could be higher, and then they could work their way down, which they have done. Now, what didn't happen at the time, we did move a lot of kids at that point. But over the summer, the smaller Prairie Branch boundary still backfilled, either because people relocated back into Prairie Branch or whatever. So Prairie Branch ended up that next year, I think they were close to 90% again right off the bat. But we had redistributed, we had reallocated, we had solved a problem. But the new problem is that we had a lot of growth that summer after a boundary adjustment. So the long answer that I give you is it kind of depends. If a school is on a growth trajectory like Prairie Branch and Matthews are right now, if you can get them down to 80% or lower, then that's going to buy you a few years of growth. But a school whose attendance area is not a growth area, you can play with it up to 90%. Another creative solution would be, we talk about Matthews being a 3-section school and the others being a 4. So if you think about how many sections you have, let's say you have 12 sections of a grade level across the district right now. Let's just say it's 12. It's more than that, but we're going to call it 12. You don't have the funds to build a whole new elementary school, but you have the funds to build most of an elementary school. Well, maybe you're building to get you another 3 sections, so you're going to go from 12 as a district up to 15. But that new elementary school you just built has the capacity for 3 more, and the cost on the next 3 is going to be a lot cheaper than the first 3. So that's a way to stagger in that we don't have a high trajectory of growth. We're slow growth. We're pushing in the boundary. What can we afford now? Where's a good location for that school to go, and what makes sense for the future? And then let's design it in a way that it has room to be added onto so that potentially it could double in the future. So that would be one way to kind of map all that out. And then you can play those percentages in the short term without coming across to the community. You don't want to spend $40 million and then have a school that looks like it's empty when you're done. So you want to pace it out so that it looks like. And I think this community has a long history of, we don't build a school until it's already a little bit past due. Like we already have the kids. We just need a new place for them to be. And I think we've had a lot of years where we've done it that way, so that we're not overbuilding.
Like we knew they weren't the capacity of what South was, and then we knew exactly how to make those additions happen as that then
Yeah.
continued to fill.
Yeah,
Could we do the same?
we could
type
do
of
the same thing for elementary. And so if you follow, we use the same design for 3 of our elementary schools, and we won't do that again. It's been enough years, we'll come up with a new design. But the concept of 3 wings of classrooms, it's worked for us at 3 of our elementary schools, both of our middle schools. It's a pretty simple concept. So north we We started with 1.5 wings, and then we came back and we added the other 1.5. So it seems reasonable that you could, it might be that architects recommend that type of an approach. Just make sure you have the site for it.
So understanding we're not going to solve all the problems tonight, my, I guess, final question is, does it make sense to evaluate moving other programs out of our buildings? And so building a building for like IT, for example, I think is
Right.
mostly
At North.
at North. Is it cheaper and more effective to pull them out of, and I don't know what all we have at all of the elementary schools.
Right.
But pull those special things out.
I will say, if we had technology in Prairie Branch or Matthews right now, we would be actively working to move them out. And when the middle school is where we have the least concern for growth, and so it's safe to leave technology there for now. But at some point, that'll be the next lever we pull, and we'll say technology's got to go. We got to find a home for technology. The problem that we have with our programming at the elementary schools is that all of those programs are schools where we want a level of integration into regular education, and it just gets a little bit trickier. Now, what we've done in recent years is we have reevaluated which schools have which programs with that in mind, space in mind, but, and not to say we couldn't move a little bit around, but we probably wouldn't move an entire program out of, like, as an island. But I think technology is a good example, what we will do someday at the middle school.
That makes me think of the question, like, is there any sort of long-range planning? I know we have Sny Valley for high school for an alternative education approach. Those needs are just as prevalent in K through 8.
Yeah.
Is there any plans or ideas or thoughts that we could also address, like an alternative education setting for those students that need it? Because we know those needs are increasing in a variety of parameters.
Yeah.
Because it's not, alternative education isn't like a bad thing. It's a way
Right.
to meet students' needs. Is that something that we could?
We
look at?
we have that in the vision list of these are the needs that we see in the future. And so 2 of them would be some sort of alternative education, K-12, and maybe it doesn't go down to K, but right now our alt school is a credit recovery program. We have high school students who would benefit from an alternative setting that are not appropriate for them to be at Sny Valley Academy right now for credit recovery. We have some students that they might be at risk, but they're not behind in their credits. And so the way the system is set up is they don't get that help until it gets worse. But we know now that they're at risk. So that's a program we'd like to make space for. And then another program is more of a therapy-based setting. A young person who has experienced some type of trauma in their life, yes, they need all the basics for their education, but to share a regular ed classroom with a student with 20 other kids that you're sharing an adult, if you've experienced trauma in your life, that might not be the best recipe for you to really grow academically. And we'd like to have a facility that would support that as well. Our community engagement committee on facilities planning, those are conversations that they're having, and the architects, those are components that we're missing out of the current long-range plan. And so the architects have all those flavors of, these are the kinds of things that we want to make room for moving forward, and that we expect to have them report back yet this school year on that. And it still won't answer all the questions, but it'll at least have all those programming captured where the board can sign off on the long-range plan and say, yes, we endorse that this is the direction we're headed as a school district.
So at the high school, if we were to proceed with the next phase, my understanding was that would actually reduce our capacity slightly from where it is now. Is that right?
Yeah, if our next phase at the high school is only renovation, then we will actually lose capacity. The only way that we will keep capacity is that we do, for every room that becomes now a big corridor space, we'd have to replace it on the front of the school. So that next phase at the high school could be enough addition to offset any subtraction, and then it'd be really clear what space is left behind for a later addition. Or we could decide we're ready just to build this thing out and grow the capacity and finish the renovation on the inside of the school.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the enrollment trends? Okay. That will take us to the bus transportation for grades 6 through 12.
I'll serve this up and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Gooch to answer the hard questions. We were asked this summer, what would it take to separate our routes, get our middle schoolers and our high school students have traditionally rode the same bus. And then the bus it'll go to the middle school and then the high school, or vice versa, depending on AM or PM. And so on the bottom right, where it says current 2-tier start and end times, that's what our school schedules look like this year. So that's our actual. Over the summer, it was actually, in preparation for this upcoming school year, we made some adjustments to these start and end times, because last year we had some routes that when they get done running their middle school, high school routes, some of them were not getting their elementary route started on time. And we were having issues between the buses that have to be at both the high school and a middle school. Some of those weren't getting where they needed to be on time. And so we put a little bit more space between these start and end times that you see on the 2-tier system. Well, a side effect of that was that by spreading things out, we were able to reduce the number of middle school and high school buses where it has all those kids combined. We were able to reduce that down to 4. So we only have 4 routes right now that combine middle school and high school kids. I'm not sure that even all of our building level administrators realize that their kids are not sharing buses with the other grade spans. So doing what we did to get to the 2-tier actually went a long way to reducing the number of buses that are combined. And like I said, we've been running those combined routes for years. So Dr. Gooch and Mr. Brady, they kind of worked on, okay, what would it take? And basically, this sample 3-tiered start and end times, this is just a sample. This this is going to get people excited, and not necessarily all in a good way, but when you go to a 3-tier system, basically what that means is, like right now, you have a bus driver who runs a route, picks up middle school kids, high school kids, and then they run an elementary route. Well, a true 3-tier system is that there are 3 tiers that drivers run in 3 separate routes every day. So they would do the high school route, and then they would go do at 7:20, and then they would go do South Middle School, 8:15, and then they would do Snibar and Stony Point kids, either Snibar or Stony Point route at 9 a.m. So pretty much every driver would run 3 full solid routes. And in order to go from where we are now, which is kind of a hybrid of that, and again, we only have 4 buses that have combined middle school and high school kids, to a full 3-tier system, just for pay and benefits, the minimum on that would be $105,000 that we would have to do. So, but honestly, we set out to bring this report to the board, not realizing how good a shape we were in and how. So I think we're not recommending that we move to a 3-tier, but I will tell you, the more schools you add, the more it becomes essential that you move to a 3-tier. So this 3-tier system, it is the future. It's not a future that administratively we envision right now, but it is a good preview to kind of see, elementary number 5, maybe that triggers this, where just physically it's not possible to run a 2-tier system anymore with one more elementary school. But I know it reads like a recommendation, but we're not recommending this at this time. This is just a preview of what it would take to get those last 4 buses separated out.
Were you getting there was a lot of pushback, or there was a lot of questions about going to or separating the middle school and high school routes that why we went to this, or was there some of these?
Well, I think, I mean, the way that we've been doing it for years, I think it's always been unpopular with the parents of sixth graders. You know, the prospect of, you know, your kid goes from being the oldest on the bus to now, not only are they the youngest, but they're sharing a bus. Now, there's not a lot of juniors and seniors who ride the bus, but you're sharing the bus ride with 15-year-olds, and 15-year-olds are not like sixth graders. So the trade-off is now our freshmen in the afternoon, they might be at one of these express stops where they're at an intersection, they're not 2 doors down from their house anymore. And so that's an adjustment for the freshmen this year, is we're running fewer routes. And if it's a rainy day, or, you know, we're going to have bad weather days this winter, and if some of those kids, the express stop is far enough away from their house that they just soon be dropped off in front of their house, those kids could stay on the bus, and they could go with it when they go pick up the middle school kids, and then they can get off at their normal stop. So they'll have that option on a bad weather day. But to answer your question, the concerns haven't been any more than in the past. It's just every year's parents of sixth graders are, wait a minute, the sixth graders ride the bus with the high school kids? So
What was the difference in this route now versus what we did before? Was there?
how much time did we put between the start and end times? How many minutes was it?
Well, and the cost difference, was there
Oh.
quite a bit of a cost difference for this?
No. So really the way that we accomplished this was just like Dr. Welly said, adding time in between. So we were able to add 5 minutes on the front and 5 minutes on the back, separating the high school and the middle school. So just that additional time allows the high school bus routes to handle more of what we are calling the express stops, which allow the more high school students to come off of the buses, and which means less high school students with middle school. So there really wasn't much of a cost difference. It's just adding a few more express stops from the high school to the middle school.
We didn't have to hire more drivers to do this. We didn't have to
That's what I
add
was gonna ask.
buses.
So we didn't have, there was
Nope.
no more.
No.
No.
And that's why we were surprised with the results, because I wouldn't have guessed that we could have gotten this kind of result with the minimal amount of change that we made.
We wouldn't have to.
This isn't the reason we did it.
With the 3-tier though, would we have to add more? I mean, we need more buses?
And what would happen is it isn't that you wouldn't still have part-time drivers, but you would need nearly your whole team to be full-time drivers. And so a lot of this cost comes from part-time to full-time, and the benefits, becoming benefits eligible. And then I don't know if current full-time drivers, if there was longer hours written into this, or was this mostly was a transition, wasn't it? The 105,000 between part-time and full-time.
That's correct. It's just the transition.
It seemed like it would be good to stick with the 2-tier as long as we could, because I foresee a lot of other issues coming up because of 3-tier, just with start times being different at 2 different middle schools and all kinds of stuff that, not that you're necessarily going with this, but what I'm saying is, I don't know what, or if we've thought through what the 3-tier would bring up, what kind of things what kind of challenges would that cause us? But I'm glad that the 2-tier is working as well as it is. How long do we think that we can manage the 2-tier before we would have to go to the 3-tier?
I think that might just all depend on how quickly we would need to do
How quickly we
something
grow?
else with another elementary school. Because once you add a fifth school there, you need more drivers, you need more staffing. And I think in that situation, you'd have to look at how many more routes you're putting in place by moving the current routes to accommodate the fifth school, and then ultimately look at it at that point and say, all right, now with this, is it time to relook at this and separate it somehow and make an elementary school earlier than some of the others as well? I know that's common in other school districts. So we would have to evaluate it and kind of try to come up with the best way to balance out the three of them. And you know, to go back, this $105,000 is just that staffing. There would be additional bus purchases that would be needed on top of that as well. But right now, it's just an unknown.
What has the feedback been from the changes this year? Has there been any, has it been positive, nothing? What has the feedback been from?
There's no, I haven't heard complaints, and that's in the service side of things. That's a win. I think one of the data points that we're curious about through the course of the year is, do we have fewer bus incidents because we have the separation? Or because now it's a bus full of middle school only or high school only, do we have more incidents on the bus? So it'll be interesting to see what the data shows us.
So the complaints I've received, and there haven't been any this year, it was all last year, I think are with what you're calling express routes, where kids are being dropped off.
And we did have some
further.
express routes a year ago, yes.
Yeah, so that's really where the heartburn is, when you've got, I guess a freshman probably who's being dropped off a lot further.
Down the street, yeah.
A lot further. In my case, it's a lot further, and so that was causing some heartburn, but
Yeah.
haven't heard anything lately.
So it was the rainy day, the rainy day, the really cold day.
Well, I think it's the safety issue
Mhm.
more than even the rainy day. It's you got a freshman, they don't necessarily, the parents don't necessarily want the kiddo dropped off that far where they can't
Right.
put eyes on them.
Yeah.
I think I had heard, because we did start some of them last year, but not at the beginning of the year. I think, was it a change at one point in time?
I don't
maybe?
remember when we picked it up.
Like if it was started to get
If
piloted.
it wasn't at the very beginning, it was probably soon after school started. Like if they had, when they do route adjustments, so they have too many kids on the bus, then,
They
and
shift
they don't
from
usually
there.
wait till October to make those adjustments. That's usually done the first couple of weeks.
So the only feedback that I had heard at that time was they appreciated getting home sooner. So they weren't on the bus as long. So it was like, oh, that's different, but I am getting home sooner, so the benefit outweighed the cost.
And there's a huge benefit to us for teens and preteens to not be on the bus any longer than they have to be.
So the current two-tier start and end times and that setup still has express stops?
Yes.
Okay. More this year than last year. And that is the feedback that I was getting was, like Jared was saying, was the safety aspect of it, that they didn't want their freshmen having to figure out how to walk home, and they didn't want their freshmen out there figuring it out on their own.
Now, are there freshmen or are there high school students, Dr. Gooch, who the express stop is their only option? No. So they could. There are? Okay. So they could stay on the bus longer. They could have a longer route and get dropped off closer to home. So it is an option.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
then
that's the
that's when
case.
they're mixed with the middle school
Yes,
students.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And that was the second
Yeah.
issue. So we
So
still
we're
have
trying.
those issues. Okay. Any other questions or comments on the transportation? All right. That will take us to number 3, the communications plan.
Yeah, we bring this plan back with revisions. We had a discussion with the board in July, and then as it worked out, we hosted a communications planning workshop with Missouri School of Public Relations here in September. And so it gave the team a chance to kind of reflect on that, have some PR pros in the room. And so I'm gonna let Dr. Allen kind of highlight the changes for you. Fundamentally, what's different from what you saw this summer?
Yeah, we had kind of 3, I'd call them major/minor updates or changes to the plan. One was under our goal setting. We have 3 key goals for this year, and we've added an evaluation system to that to allow ourselves to reflect at the end of the school year and kind of measure our progress on those 3 goals that we set for this year. We had already had this piece, but we're continually working on it, which is a script for emergencies. So in the world of communications, you know that the faster the better in a lot of ways, and the more accurate the better. And so under communicating during a crisis, we've hyperlinked kind of pre-drafted emergency messages, and we continue to add to that as we have new emergencies, because you can't think of everything. And we'll continue to manipulate or change several of those to morph a little bit from our school messenger we previously used to Parent Square, because there's some differences in the number of characters allowed and those sorts of things. But continuing to work on that. And then under tools for communication, we just added a little more in depth on Parent Square and sort of our tiered approach to some of the different features of Parent Square that allow for digest mode where you get it at the end of the day versus an urgent alert that you would get blasted out whether you have signed up for notifications or not, because it's just so urgent. So you'll see the various levels there. So while this is I would call it more of like our annual priorities for our communications plan and sort of our general outline. When it comes to crisis, the specifics for our crisis situations will come through our annual priority that we're currently working on, that is part of our emergency operations plan, because communicating during a crisis is sort of a whole beast unto itself based on the type of crisis. So that'll be much more comprehensive and sort of in a different place than this plan. It'll be part of the EOP, which will be accessible through the new app that we're partnering with Dr. Gooch to work on throughout the school year.
Okay. Any questions on the communications plan or comments?
Oh. Let me. Thank you.
We can review those and look at that. So as far as the communications during a crisis, I know it has been brought up from the board multiple times about the term you doing a tabletop or just getting all of our partners together and everybody walking through, talking through who's going to be doing what, when, has that taken place, when's that going to take place, if it hasn't taken place. I think that's one thing that I know I've been looking for at least a year, if not longer, to hear and figure out. So, does somebody want to answer that?
It's a conjunct, we're at a weird place right now. What we have had in the past is our emergency operations manual, which is a physical binder.
Sitting over there.
Yeah,
Can I
very
see
large
that?
binder. We also have a flip chart that are in teachers' classrooms. We also have a trauma response plan, and we also have a crisis response plan. So the three of those in the past have operated as sort of separate entities, and we might have to refer to two of them or three of them or one of them, depending on what type of crisis it is. So in going through things last year, we realized that's not the most efficient. It's hard to train people when there's multiple plans. It's hard to coordinate when there's multiple plans, which is why we made it an annual priority this year. It so deeply involves my department with communications and student services, and it involves Dr. Gooch's department with safety. And so basically it is getting everybody at the same table, from the safety committee to the counselors to communications, and trying to sort of revamp and combine all of those. So, I mean, right now our goal is to move everything to an electronic version, which is through the emergency operations plan instead of manual. Weirdly enough, since MSBA rolled out that app, they just this week rolled out a huge guidebook for us on how to best develop your EOP. And it's an extensive guidebook with lots of hyperlinks and lots of resources, and we've just started to read through it. And so the guidance to use that app is just now coming out. So we really are hoping for this school year to spend an enormous amount of time fine-tuning all of this and combining these and making the best EOP or emergency operations plan that we can in conjunction with both of our departments. So as far as scheduling, I think right now we're in the planning and combining and creating phase, identifying those roles, what makes best sense, how can we incorporate these communications from each of these different plans all into one so it doesn't look different every time. And then with that's going to come new and additional training, tabletop exercises, scenarios, and those sorts of things.
We met recently with our Grain Valley PD partners at our district safety committee. We had all of our administrative reps from each of the buildings here, and we went through a lot of things that we're working on for the year. We've set another meeting just a month later. So that's a established committee that knows that they're going to meet a lot more often this year than what they're used to meeting. They know that we have ambitious goals for the types of district planning and preparation, how we want to be different moving forward than what we have right now. I also sat in on a session the other day where the Stony Point staff were introduced to an app where each of them now has the power on their app to initiate a building-wide lockdown. And so the technology that is available to us is really powerful and needs to be fully integrated into our crisis response.
Something I'll just add to what Dr. Welly said too about our district safety committee meeting recently, along with some time with the Grain Valley Police Department. All of the individuals who are the specific building rep as part of the safety committee, after I was able to submit the basic plan, the first part of our progress towards going online with the new EOP tool. Now, after that has been done, each person from the safety committee now has additional tasks to do. And so I will be bringing together a smaller group from a representative from every building, getting together so we can all work together to have the same common language on all of the buildings when they develop their own specific updated chain of command charts and so on. So all buildings will look exactly the same. So they all, after I submitted the plan, they got a message, or they've got actually links to do, to do some tasks. I sent a message out to them and said, hold on, I actually have a meeting next week with the gentleman who directs the Center for Education Safety for the state, and he and I are going to kind of go through and plan what my next time or meeting will be with the individual building reps to, again, work together to do their specific building tasks, which is part of the next step in us updating our EOP.
As a district level annual priority, the board's first quarterly review from us on how things are going on all of our priorities will be as soon as the November business meeting. So, you're getting a pretty good update tonight, but it'll all be in writing for you when we meet in November.
As far as some of the smaller boots on the ground details, so if there was an intruder, doors are locked, that whole protocol happens. Do we know for sure if every classroom in every building has those installed?
They do.
They do.
Yes, they do.
And then how do our staff members communicate with each other? Like a walkie-talkie or some sort of communication device? Is that how they're communicating with each other?
If they're trying to communicate from the classroom to the office, they would use the communication tool that's in the classroom, like an intercom. Some buildings are outfitted with a phone. Not all schools have those. It just kind of depends on the building. If it were a situation where they needed to exit the building, for example, a fire drill or something like that, then there are radios assigned at different locations in the building, and there is a kind of a team leader who is in charge of the communication to and from administration during those
But the
times.
district provides 100% of those communication devices?
As of right now,
The
yes.
cost of them? Okay. Okay. I'll get with you on some other stuff.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll take it one step further and just add every staff member is trained annually in active shooter and threats.
Some of the room-to-room communication, room to
Correct.
administrative offices,
Yep.
just making sure that equipment is synced up and operational.
Sure. Room to room that is not possible in all of our buildings
Okay.
where you are in one room to the next. However, we are evaluating that as well.
And the school has a plan, however, that if it was an intruder, everybody knows how they're going to know what's happening. They're going to know how to get their updates. And it might not be from their neighbor, but everybody knows how they're going to get their updates.
That is correct. We have worked through that with the buildings yes.
Speaking of security, have we filled the additional SRO position?
Your ears I can't say ears are burning you. So this afternoon I actually
I'm
got.
honestly asking because I've not heard.
No, that's great. Hot off the press. No. We have interviews in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Interviews in 2 weeks.
Correct.
That's a fair share.
So we write.
I wasn't sure what he was going to
We
say.
write the check, but can't make the announcement. Got it. I appreciate the update.
Sure.
Thank you.
I have a few quick questions. We've moved to Parent Square, and that will be for all communication. So if school's canceled due to snow, that comes
Yes.
through Parent Square, and Parent Square will send me a text message or
Yes.
whatever.
Phone call, text,
If,
email.
just
all of
like-
those, whatever
And-
options you've got.
And
check
is,
with, yeah.
has that become our emergency communication system as well?
Yes. It's everything.
Okay. Can you access that from anywhere?
I can.
Yes.
Okay, so we're
It's phone
good
app.
there.
Website.
Okay.
And even for the end user who has not, how do we say that? Verified their account, we can still toggle a switch and give you an emergency alert on a school cancellation. So you're going to get a text from us whether you ask for it or not.
And that's okay as a parent. I like that, but I know that there are some that are not parents in the district anymore and haven't been for quite some time that receive those.
Yeah.
And they are not happy about that, which
Yeah.
could be a violation.
They can let us know, and we can find out who has listed them as an emergency contact, and we can kind of thread that back for them.
How do we refresh that though? How do people fall off of that? My kid's a senior, they graduate, I don't have any more kids in the district.
It should all be through Power School, so it's
So
synced
it
every
just
single night at
falls-
midnight.
Falls off.
Yeah,
So
if-
if they're still, we just sent out a message this week to everybody who has not verified, which I would suspect would be somebody not interested in verifying their account, and said, if you are no longer have a student in the district, if no longer have an interest in receiving these, you can call this number or email this in case they don't want to talk to somebody. And we are sending that out almost weekly at this point to try to get. So what we've already been able to do is cipher through all of the emails that were getting bounced or rejected and work through that. But what we have is this large number of parents that haven't verified. So what we're trying to decide is, do you want the communication, or are you still part of the district and just haven't verified your email and phone number? Or do you want taken off? And so we're just trying to get some communication back so we can get that number down.
Okay. The other thing I don't have concerns necessarily, but I'd ask that you think about the triggers between the different tiers of communication. So you've done a great job kind of explaining what they are, but I don't understand the triggers between each one. Like, what really constitutes the difference between tier 1 and tier 2? How do you escalate those? So, and like I said, you've got like a description here, but I'm just not real clear on how that would transition. So you might want to consider the triggers there. And then finally, just thinking about the end user, the parent, and this isn't an emergency at all, but things like the lunch menu, something that I have to access daily for my kids. It takes me like 4 or 5 clicks to get there. And how do we make that, something like that, easier for the parent and the kiddos to actually access and see quickly? So as we're looking at how we communicate, how our system is structured, the framework behind it, I think we need to take the perspective of the parent or the consumer there and say, okay, what's going to be easy for them? Look at things like that and how we might make that simpler.
Makes sense.
Each school has a quick links that they can choose what are very accessible to a parent at that school. So that would be something wonderful, like a lunch menu would be wonderful to add to that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and there's a real good chance I'm not
Thinking of all of them.
accessing it the most efficient way. I'm going through some app on my phone and I'm, doing
Yeah.
this and
Yeah.
it's that, I don't know what, that blue looking one there.
No, Jared, I agree because it's on the app and then you hit lunch menus, but then it just gives you everything
Yeah,
that has to deal with nutrition and the free lunch
You gotta find the button.
application and
too.
everything.
right.
So then you scroll all the way down and you have to find it through basically a whole handbook. But yeah, if we did it on the links, that would be a very
Yeah.
Yeah.
smart place to just put that current month's menu. That'd be great.
It wasn't a big
I
deal
agree.
because they used to send it to us
Yeah.
every month, and I'm not suggesting they do that again.
Yeah.
But it's just like when they stop doing that and it's not on the fridge anymore.
Need easy
It's-
access one way or another.
Yeah, right.
I
Mornings
would-
are
That's good.
frantic at my house.
Yes.
Used to be easy.
Just
I
so I
would-
can prepare it, what grade do they stop sending it home?
It's earlier than that for me. Yeah, I don't get it for any of my kids. So
Sorry.
I w-
Yeah. Okay.
I would add to that mid-October through parent-teacher conferences, our climate and culture survey will come out. I feel like communication speaks to climate and culture, so we are planning to add a couple questions. We're also reducing the total number of questions because it's long and we have trouble getting people to complete it, as you know. So we're revamping it a little bit anyway. We're going to add a couple questions on to try to get some parent community feedback. We felt like by mid-October, people had played enough, knew what they were missing, what they wish they knew more about, and we should be able to get some good feedback from that survey as well.
But some people, I mean, we have grandparents who still have a home phone.
Yeah, phone call.
Okay, so
Yeah,
they are
yeah.
getting phone calls, because like I only get the text message. So that's what my question, we just
Yeah.
said text message and email, but we didn't say phone calls, and so I just want to ensure.
Yeah, so I just got one from the high school last night about upcoming fall conferences. It's really up to the user, which they select and how they choose to send out their message. For emergencies, I would definitely say we will always do the phone call as well. But day to day, I think it would depend on the principal if they chose to use the
Okay.
phone call
I
option or
just
not.
wanted to
depending on-
clarify,
Yeah.
because you just said the two,
Yeah.
and then I was like,
Those are the dominant. Mhm.
Yes, good question, good question.
So in like all these things that we're talking about, like what you just said,
Uh-huh.
we would, for an emergency, we would do this.
Mhm.
I think those are kinds of the things that we're talking about as well. Is that documented somewhere in the future? This is our process. For an emergency, you do a phone call.
So yes, we would do email, voice calls, and push notifications for urgent alerts and emergency communications. That'd be our tier 3.
Okay. All right. One of the other things that I had noticed, and I don't know if it's just in the mobile version or not, there used to be a place for constituents to email the board, and that's no longer on our website. There's no button to email the board
On the school district website, is that the one you're on,
on the
or
school
the app?
district,
The-
on the school district website. I don't know. I don't get it. I haven't got one. You used to get them? I don't get them because there's nowhere for them to email, would be
Yeah,
my
we
guess.
put it. Yeah, we need to make sure it's on there.
Yeah, that's an easy fix, yeah.
Well, and what we'll do is we will hyperlink it the way that we do with other staff so that the email itself isn't on there because you're going to get all sorts of crazy stuff. But if somebody clicks and actually does a message, it's a little, I know. I know most of those are from me.
Crazy.
Come on.
Okay. I had
Yes.
noticed that and I just had forgotten to bring it up.
Absolutely.
that-
We'll put that on the Meet the Board page then for each one of your names, and then we can do the
Yeah.
board, yeah, so that they all go to that email.
That goes to the board president, but it also goes to the superintendent,
Right.
correct? So we've got
Right.
two eyes on those emails.
Thanks.
Okay. So as far as a timeline, should we set a timeline? Is there a timeline on progress? How's that gonna be tracked?
So
Well, we're going to report back quarterly already. But if there's something specific that needs to happen more often, we can do that too. But
Okay.
in November, so a month and a half is when our first quarterly report on the progress of our annual priorities.
Okay. Any other questions on the communications plan? No? All right, thank you. That will take us to the board policies portion of the workshop. So this will be the local review 2024 C. This will be the second read on these policies. And we will start with policy EB, safety program. Does anybody have any comments or
Yes.
questions? Okay.
On all of them, we need to look at spacing. I'm saying this for Jared and I. Every one of them has spacing issues.
Oh, yeah. See here. Just kinda. This gets weird.
Yeah, when it gets converted to PDF.
Well, if we can fix the technical glitch, then.
Okay. Anything else? And we'll just keep that as a running note on each of them.
Yeah, we don't have to repeat that.
That's why I said just get it out of the way now.
First sentence of the last paragraph, we're on safety program, right? Just make sure I'm in the right spot.
Yes.
It lists out classrooms, laboratories, and school shops. I think we could probably can make that more concise and just say all school facilities or school facilities.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Okay.
Well, the third sentence, now that I'm kind of rereading that paragraph, hazardous conditions indicated by inspectors will be reported to the board and corrected, which is important, but they also need to be reported to the administration. Is that just assumed?
Yeah, I think it's assumed
Okay.
because I would
This is a
think,
board policy.
like
so
I would think in the last 12 months, like when we got a report of lead in the water, we passed that on to the board.
Mhm.
When we were doing the demo at the old CO and we had asbestos in the drywall tape in one of the rooms, and we reported that to the board, so.
Okay.
Okay. And as far as each building administrator, they're all in charge of developing and implementing their own safety programs per building. Is that
Well, yes, they get a lot of help. So in addition to the red binder, which the big thick red binder, by the way, that's every building combined. So the schools don't each get something that's a mile thick, but like a high school chemistry lab would have separate plans, or you know, if there's fertilizer on site or whatever, they would have special plans for that. But most of the schools, it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Any other comments on EB safety program? All right. That would take us to EBB communicable diseases. Did anybody see anything in this one? Nope. All right. We're going to mark that one as reviewed. The next one would be EBC1 emergency drills. Any comments on this one? Okay, I do. So under emergency drills, the superintendent or designee in cooperation with the building principals will develop the emergency drills. Just hold on to that for a second. So then down here, the superintendent or building principal will schedule and execute these drills. The principal who schedules the emergency drills will provide the superintendent advance notice. Do those things happen? Yes. Okay.
I would like to add the word superintendent or designee.
Okay.
I'd like to designate Dr. Gooch.
And then as we go through, so the district will cooperate and coordinate emergency drills with other community agencies such as fire department, law enforcement officials, emergency medical services, and local emergency planning committees. Does that happen?
All those agencies, yes. I'm not sure who a local emergency planning committee would be other than our safety committee.
The Central Jackson County Emergency Management Association, CJC EMA, yeah.
There you
And
go.
there is a monthly meeting that if I have, I go to those if I can. Sometimes I have, you know, a duplicate schedule. And then there's representation from CJC, from all the different police departments, school districts, and so on. So yeah, we have a a larger, more broad group that talks about emergencies and stuff as well.
But we coordinate our drill with those agencies.
When we have specific drills, they are, like, for example, CJC is notified when we have a fire drill.
Okay.
And if we are to have, you know, an intruder drill, then we would work with our school resource officers and stuff, so.
Okay.
Yep.
And then that'll take us to the last part of that. Emergency evacuation drills on school buses will be conducted for all students in grades kindergarten through 6 at least once per semester, with the first drill completed prior to October 31. That all happens.
Yes,
Okay.
it does. Our school resource officers work with Mr. Brady to schedule that at each building.
So I would like to look at adding language to notify parents of the dates when these, especially like fire drills and active shooter, things like that, so that parents know that when their kid comes home and says, we did X, Y, Z, that they'd know what they're talking about and to be able to expect it.
I would say in practice, it's not uncommon for a school social media post to say, we did an evacuation drill today, but I'm not sure that's what you're talking about.
Right. I would say maybe communicate after the fact and not
That's
ahead
fine.
of
It can be
time.
after the fact.
Yeah,
as long as
I worry a
it's-
little bit about ahead of time, because then you know when you've got potentially 1,500 students
sure.
outside, so.
No, I even if it's the principal through Parent Square, so somebody would send something out.
Yeah, hey, we
saying,
practiced
we
the
did
fire drill
this
today." Yeah.
I get that. So like, I've already got that from South Middle this year, and anytime it happened at elementary, I always got it from elementary as well. So because yes, especially whenever it's kindergarten and they do those for the first time.
I remember getting them last year for kindergarten, but I haven't gotten anything
gotten
for
anything this year yet?
first grade yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and that's what I think. There's just a disconnect. It's not
Best practices for
uniform. Yeah. It was teacher to teacher. It sounds
That's
like.
building- Well, and so that's true, because in elementary, I think a lot of the times we rely on classroom teachers. Making that shift to middle school, it came from the principal. So,
So can we develop some type of language to
Consistency.
put in here to make it policy to at least notify after is fine?
Yeah, is that that's what you guys want to do? Okay. The bus safety drills. Is that statute?
Probably law, yeah. We could do it in more, we just have to change the language. It's just state law probably says you have to do it K through 6.
no, the education just has to be provided in practice. They don't have to be done together.
Yeah, I see where you're like K6. That,
Yeah. when it's
that seems kind of,
K-5.
yeah, K5, kind of the old
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
K6 elementary.
We can look into
At least make it K through 8.
what we are bound to do and what's actually happening, and then we can make adjustments when we bring it back. Mm-hmm.
Good catch.
Yeah, fair.
On the very first one, which is in paragraphs, it says districts not required to hold earthquake drills. Obviously, we don't need to, but why is it in parentheses and why is it districts?
Sure. MSBA puts out 2 different versions of the policy. One is for districts who are required because of where they are located, and others are. So this just clarifies for anybody who reads policy, which version of it are we working on?
And this isn't part of policy, but do you know with the bus evacuation drills, are those only done in the morning when they practice those?
I believe it's after the student, well, I mean,
Because it's normally done when they get to school.
it is, it's done after they get to school and school day starts, then Mr. Brady will bring buses back over to the schools and they'll practice it then. I don't know.
Logistically, that's probably when it makes the most sense, rather than doing it at dismissal at the end of the day.
Fair. Students that only ride the bus home, which I think impacts a lot of elementary students because they would use the Valley Kids Before Care, never have practiced. But they ride the bus every day.
We can ask the question.
Yeah, I'm still wondering if they still require every student regardless, like every elementary student to go out and practice that on their particular bus, even though that they may go to Valley Kids.
Well, I guess that's
don't
kind of one of the
think
things I was
so.
wondering, because I don't know that my
not
daughter's ever done a bus drill.
We
She
can
doesn't
fi-
ride the bus,
we can find
except
out.
for on
Field trips.
field trips.
Right. Yeah, I'll look into that. Those are good questions.
All right. Anything else? All right. That will take us to EBCA Crisis Intervention Plan. Any questions or comments on this one? Going once? All right. So that one we can mark reviewed. That will take us to ECB, Building and Grounds Maintenance. Anything on that one?
Preventative maintenance? I know they have a,
Yeah, they have okay, so the operations department has a monthly checklist of all the different preventative maintenance items that they need to be doing based off of the timing of the year and that type of stuff. And then they'll go through and they'll report back to me how many preventative maintenances there are within that particular month and how many they accomplished.
A big one that happens in the fall that you'll sometimes drive up on is when they're replacing out all of the filters on all the roof units. And so you just see cardboard and filters and ladders and they're just up there. That's when you realize how many roof units there are in the district when they're making the rounds on that.
Yeah, the transition from cold to hot, you can, when the heater kicks on, heat kicks on for the first time, you'll get a little bit of a smell and, yep. Yep.
Okay. So anything else on that one? No? We can mark that one reviewed. That takes us to ECD, traffic and parking controls.
I don't have a question in regards to the policy itself. However, I do have a question in like, as we have completed all of our stuff at the high school, when it can be, I assume, because of the policy that we have in place, it can be really chaotic when football practice is ending and you have all of those students walking back through the parking lot to the building to get their stuff. Band students have just finished practicing. You've got a long car line of parents to pick up there, as well as students crossing parking lot. And then the event happens. So like last night and then NHS inductions happening. So then you have a slew of students and parents and family. And so it's just very high traffic in a bunch of very chaotic ways. And I'm not sure with having that activity entrance, kind of the traffic flow and even like the kiddos walking back from the field, they're always terrible at that. But if that's been looked at now that everything is finished and all of these facilities are being used, and it's great that we have the capacity to do all those things and all those things are happening, but then just safety-wise and flow of traffic-wise,
Yeah.
what that looks like in those parking lots.
And just tracking the flow on those.
Yeah, just kind of get a pulse on it again.
Yeah, I've shared similar concerns. I know that's not the policy necessarily, but we have
Right,
people
it's-
parking in what should be no parking zones, and it's just sort of a free-for-all. So anything we can do to fix that would be helpful.
They might want to park for an 8th grade football game in a way that they would park on a Friday night high school football game when there are so many more, when there are no, when everything is packed, but then they park in crazy creative places when there's plenty of parking spots.
Okay. Very good. Anything additional on the policy itself? All right, we will mark that one as reviewed. That'll take us to EEA, Student Transportation Services. Anything on this policy?
My question is on the resident students living 3 1/2 miles or more from school entitled to free, and then may provide for less than 3.5. Any particular reason why that's in there? Because I at least know kids are getting picked up
Yeah, the
really close.
the statutes are funny about this. The board authorizes transportation of students who live closer than 3.5 miles from school when you authorize the bus routes in the fall. In addition, you also authorize in the fall that we will transport students who live less than a mile from school. And that one is significant because there's no state funding for less than a mile. So we don't have to transport students. We don't have to transport students who live less than 3.5 miles from school. But if we did that, we wouldn't have buses, except for high school routes, probably. So it's just a wonky way that the state has measured things. And there's two different perimeters, and we just transport everybody. And then we pay locally. We pay local, 100% local for anybody within a mile, which is a lot of our kids. And then we pay 25% of everybody else on a good year when the state gives us full reimbursement.
75%.
Full 75% reimbursement on a good year.
Okay. Any other questions on that policy? You can chime in too if you want.
The two of us talked about earlier
Yeah.
today, so.
Yep, it's a funny read. All right, we will mark that one as reviewed. That'll take us to EEAB, school bus scheduling and routing. Anything on this one? I think we talked about this one pretty much the same here. We all,
I wouldn't mind dropping in a or designee in the first line. I'm all about delegation,
And that would be Dr. Allen, correct?
right?
I'm okay with that change. Is you guys all right with that change? Yes. All right, we're good with that. We'll make that adjustment.
Thank you.
All right. That'll take us to EFB, free and reduced priced meal service. Anything on this policy?
Is it still a thing? Is there still a milk program? There used to be a milk program with half-day kindergarten. I don't know if it's still a thing. Do you know if there's still a milk program?
I'm not sure.
I think there are, we can check, but I do think there are still legal provisions for snack programs and milk programs. I don't know if it's relevant to us, but we can ask. Inquiring
Okay.
minds. We'll find out.
So we'll find out, but we don't need to make any revisions to the policy. We'll mark it as reviewed. Or do you want to? Okay. If you find out something earth-shattering, let us know. All right.
Okay.
That will take us to EIA, property and liability insurance. Anybody see anything in this policy?
There is one issue on this, that now that we are with music, there is a question about, would you, as a matter of policy, be required to bid that at least every 6 years? I mean, in general, we want to bid the big things, but before we were with music, that seemed more relevant than now that we're with the big
I
big
think,
player.
just my personal opinion, I think bidding it every 3 years would be appropriate. So 6 certainly seems good to me. I am concerned about where it says every effort shall be made to obtain insurance at the lowest or at the most economical cost. Cheaper isn't always better
Yeah.
when it comes to insurance. I just don't know that that needs to be in here. We are going to do what we can to save as much money as possible, but I don't know that that needs to be in the policy.
Is there any aspect of that line? Do we just strike the most economical costs and leave the rest?
Say maintain insurance with, consistent with.
I think that would be fine. I don't see the 6 years. I missed that.
It's in
The next.
Last sentence.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I think that
I'm fine with it.
all finance, in my opinion, should be
I mean,
bid
yeah,
out.
I
the
think-
big things you bid.
Yeah. I was surprised when I saw 6. I thought it would be 3 as well.
And you may stay with them for 30 years. It's not.
But it doesn't preclude you from bidding it out and
I
making
think
sure
it's
you're still getting the
always
best.
good to make sure it's not just a financial thing. It's, provisions of policies. I think it's good to do a market check.
Yeah, great. Yes.
So do we want to make that switch to 3 years?
Yeah. Oh,
Or do we want to leave it at 6? I'm good to talk about it. I'm trying to come to a consensus on what we're gonna do with it.
Logistically, how much heartburn is it to bid this out every 3 years?
Well, I did like the word "at least" in there, because that means we
Could do it
could
sooner.
do it sooner.
I think there is a reasonable chance that we could get to 3 years and say, it's not worth doing it. So I think keeping 6 in there is probably appropriate, and just at least every 6
And,
years.
and the way I interpret at least every 6, Dr. Gooch and I might think that we're going to do this every 6 years, but at some point the board sees something and they're like, I think you guys need to do this sooner. Guess what? We're going to do it sooner. So,
But again, I feel that way about our health insurance,
Yeah,
our
right.
banking, everything should be every 3 years,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
And all of them together on the same month. Okay, so we're gonna leave it the way it is. We're gonna.
I'll take that. I'll
yep,
strike
we're gonna
that.
strike through that.
Economical.
And just, yeah. Anything else on that one? No. Okay. That takes us to the end of our list. Thank you.
Very good. And we do have a new list for MSBA. And so a month from now at that workshop, well, we'll introduce the new list at the business meeting this month, and we'll have this discussion a month from now on the new MSBA policies.
Very good. Okay. I would look for a motion to adjourn and go into executive session under subsection 610.021, number 3 and 13 of the revised statutes of Missouri.